Hello everyone. Today at Geoscientists Voices, a project supported by the American Geophysical Union, we are exploring the critical space where deep Earth hazards meet planetary climate risks. I am honored to be joined by Dr. Umberto Fracassi, a senior researcher at the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology in Rome, Italy. Umberto specializes in bridging the gap between raw seismic data and global multi-hazard policy to help society navigate compound risks. Umberto, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, Aleksei, thank you so much, for inviting me in this beautiful occasion, and thank you all those that would follow your very followed, in fact, new Geoscientists Voices. So thank you very much for having me on board.
Umberto, the honor is all mine, and I want to start from the beginnings because growing up and studying in Italy, a country with such a beautiful mix of geology and history, and I know that because I recently had an experience of being actually in Rome.
Oh.
So yeah, it's really a beautiful city. So how old were you when that curiosity first hit, and what was the moment you realized you wanted to pursue the geosciences?
Oh, well, it's very easy. I have one foundational myth, so to say, in Jaws, by Steven Spielberg, which you might point is not necessarily associated with the geoscience per se, but there is an explanation for everything. I was born in Pescara, which is a provincial town on the eastern seaboard of Italy, more or less at the same latitude as Rome is. And the flat where we were living was 1 block away from the seaside, and we were at the seventh floor. There was a park beneath. So I grew up literally watching the staring at the sea, where I would be drawn just naturally. So I got to geosciences before I could even know the word, of course, through through the sea, and in fact through the fascination for that strange, fantastic, luring thing that was looming out of the screen of the big cinema screen, the researcher, which of course is the character Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss. And I mean, I think I was not the only kid around overly fascinated by that figure. There was the sea right in front of me, which was not exactly the Atlantic Ocean, but you know, one gets one takes what one gets. And that's the moment. I was about 10. So I watched it, or 12, 10, 11. I watched it probably a bit underage because I think it was, forbidden for kids below 12. But I watched it about 10. So 4 years after it was released. And from that moment on, my mind was completely drawn by the sea, that fantastic thing called whatever it is. So the hook was oceanography, so to say. And then all of to top it up, when I turned 14, because I turned it during the summertime, we were on the one of those the benches, artificial benches in the seaside, and I was with a few friends hinting at well, today we can call it ripple marks. But in those days, that was out of the question. But there were ripple marks. The water was, a couple of meters deep, so it was easy to spot. And all of a sudden, a friend of mine there stops me and utters these words exactly. Umberto, You grew up to be an oceanographer. Mm, Ah, okay. Whatever that could have meant. It sounded right, okay? It sounded cool. During the afternoon on the encyclopedia. Oh, oceanographer. Oh, sounds cool. That's the beginning. So the various moments of the beginning that ignited an ever-growing and simply unstoppable and a wish. Here we are.
Wow. So that's really interesting, and kudos to Steven Spielberg for actually inspiring you with his great movie. I watched it, and it was like really fascinating and a bit scary. And I think many of the people actually watched it being underaged because it's like it's not only like a horror movie; it's also an adventure, right? Being in the
Of
sea
course.
and like so it's not only about like this crazy monster shark that kills people, but it's also about exploring the unexplored, right? So that's I think
Exactly.
that's the biggest part. It could be I don't know, giant whale or I don't know piranhas or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
Even the putting in retrospect, in hindsight, let's say, um, um, it's also about putting one's mind to the best service of an issue which is unavoidable and that you have to face whether you like it or not. And also because it has repercussions on safety. So this could be said of just any hazard out there.
yeah,
The so it is it in as any not that Jaws is like the Divine Comedy, but many artistic representations in literature above all perhaps, but also in paintings, for instance, in poetry do have a lure because they are popular ways of translating knowledge, feelings, images, whether they are actual images or representation, allegories of them. And they have an extremely powerful of communicating much, much immensely higher than science will ever do. And so personally, I'm truly an advocate. Maybe it's down the line of your questions, but the of absorbing what can be done from the from what the arts teach us in the spectacular manifestations from a great song which has a truth which rings true even much above or beyond the composer's wishes or thoughts. That there is a human reason to that, and geosciences and science as a whole is not made by a bottle; is made by humans. Uh, so that's not exactly a little factor. Uh, it is the true pivot to something that you mentioned at some stage. So the power of life, in fact, if you will.
sure. And Umberto, you mentioned about the pivot, and I want to talk more about that, of course, in connection with your life and career, because you spent nearly 2 decades at the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology doing heavy lifting technical work curating Italy's database of individual seismogenic sources. But then talking about a pivot, you deliberately pivoted into macro level multi hazards and global climate policy. So what made you realize looking at earthquakes alone wasn't enough anymore?
Well, uh, mm, it's a colossal question. The question is far more colossal than it may ring. Um, Let me just make a quick a few words better frame what you mentioned, I am a member of a working group at INGV, which INGV is more or less like the Western branch of the USGS, or what used to be the Western branch of the USGS, among other lines of research, at least for what deals with seismic hazard and the seismic risk. So I've been one of the contributors to to a database, which is in itself a contributing to the seismic hazard model of the national seismic hazard model for Italy. And that also is tiny a tiny aspect we will get there later on, which has to do indirectly with your first question. We'll get there. The earthquakes, as was incredibly brilliantly pointed out by Bonham and Ambraseys soon after the Haiti earthquake in 2010, do not kill people. Buildings do. Their science and then their beautiful and harrowing science in a paper titled "Corruption Kills" is a slap in the face of just anybody, and is a smash for a neuroscientist who acts serenely in the belief that studying seismic hazard is of help. Yes, indeed, of course. Then there is the world out there. And the world out there is complicated, is fuzzy, to say it to say it mildly. We don't need any proof because we've got too many. Just by looking out the window or reading any paper in any day, in any given day. So pursuing defense from seismic hazard solely by pursuing seismic hazard leads to, I don't want to say that leads to nowhere. It produces great strides, but only so much, because then these hazards are coexisting. Humans coexist and try to make a life out of this world, which includes worries, which includes all the numbers of issues that may hassle humans and societies. And then there are also hazards, and they unavoidably fall into some bracketing depending on the place on Earth, on the kind of country, and many other factors, spatial factors, for instance. So if there is, coming to your question, if there is one thing that can be learned, is that you cannot make factual consequential improvements into the understanding of earthquakes until you realize how their material downfall on humans and their environment is, which doesn't mean that one doesn't need to decipher seismic sources. It is fundamental. Or the way the seismic action befalls on the built environment, which is absolutely inescapable, or how the recurrence times of earthquakes, then exposes areas and countries in different fashions, trying to reconcile data. It's an already quite colossal effort, but it leads you to only so far, and you cannot ignore all the rest, which is banging at your door.
Yeah, it's really everything is interconnected, and yeah, there are probably other factors which can human factors which can prevent the injuries and the death tolls uh, from something unescapable, which is like earthquakes, which cannot be neither predicted to, like in a grand scale, of course. If you
Yeah, of
go if you
course.
go if you go beyond several minutes or something like that, and yeah, but we can work on something that can make it less injurable to people and at least to decrease the death toll. Yeah.
And we do, in fact, because I mean the great strides obtained in seismic hazard worldwide, from New Zealand to Japan to to Greece to Italy, the countries where exposure to seismic hazard is most significant, illuminates the capabilities of contributing to set standards that, if adhered to, prevent a a decisive proportion of casualties and of undesired consequences. You cannot stop an earthquake, but you can very much limit the consequences that the downfall on the human environment. Uh, mm, then the tools are there, but there is a reason. There must be a reason for which, over time, over the centuries, in fact, the something didn't really work out because it is expensive, because it is to begin with, which is human again,
Yeah.
which is complicated, or looks complicated more than it is, because it is poorly marketable, so to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, I mean, you're talking about hazards, dangers, so to say, although it's not exactly a danger. So who wants to listen about the problems? Are there not enough problems in the world? Are there not enough? Well, yes, of course. But still, earthquakes or hazards are going to happen anyway. And the so uh, passing by the concept of occurrence of the physical dimension behind the occurrence is an enormous task, because it requires compressing complex concepts into one, two words. Uh, Three, five is too much. Uh, that's a bit. in it there are no it cannot be done as a miracle, of course. And also, as the uh, mm, especially over the last, let's say, 50 years, maybe, the with the enormous human turnaround in societies globally, the kind of exposure that and the patterns of exposure that could have been conceived aged and one or two generations ago, when seismic hazard as a raw science took really gain traction, started gaining traction, has been changing so fast under our own eyes that physical concepts evolve, but they are a representation on Earth's surface. Put us in front of scenarios which had not been accounted for. One simple example is with global warming, and which is not just warming, but is spikes with heat waves. Material are not, like, I don't know, steel for rail and for railroads may or may not have been conceived to withstand those sort of yielding. And if you put in seismic action on materials which are starting to suffer from independent hazards, unforeseen hazards, you risk embarking into unexplored territory, which is something that you do not really want to do when uh, from hazard you pass on to risk, and then to the stakeholders and the institutions which are called to be take decisions which can be difficult to market.
Yeah, well, uh, yeah, I really want to talk more about it, and we'll talk more about it regarding the risks, regarding the dangers, and regarding to how to protect the coastal cities. But before that, I want to make a slight detour in our conversation because there is something I'm really interested in, and I'm asking every guest this question to track the trends in our field. Um, about the biggest hurdle, because you talked about what inspired you, so it was like the basically the easy part which got you into the sciences. But what was the single biggest hurdle, whether financial, academic, mental, or otherwise, that you personally had to overcome to succeed on your journey through active tectonics, seismology, and your eventual pivot into global climate and energy policy?
Well, to the cost of sounding obvious, it hasn't been exactly easy in to being an Italian student needing to wanting to go out in the world. Something that I wanted to do even before enrolling in the university, and pursue expanding my personal knowledge. So getting a further degrees, like, and then a master in my case in the UK, and then a PhD or whatever. It always had to do with uh, radical financial limitations, which can sound a bit awkward in 2026 to be heard of, given the financial restraints that on many counts, so contemporary societies, even in the West, in Western countries, may are may have may be facing. But it was all the more so 30 or 40 years ago. In my case, when I graduated from my bachelor, the Italian bachelor in those days in 1995, we were entering we were adhering to the financial schemes to join the EU, which was a wonderfully beneficial thing. That's there's no doubt about it. But the sacrifices, the financial sacrifices, family sacrifices to attain that were radical, pretty radical. So financing so funding research, which has always been a very weak point in Italy, not just in Italy, but in a G7 country that doesn't ring well, not at all. Well, that has forced me to uh, changing jobs, always trying to stay into geoscience one way or another, which meant always changing city or country, which can be beautiful and is part of one's personal path, of course, and it certainly was my case. But then poses or may pose sacrifices which you may or may not wish to do, or may want to do, or may be eager to do, but that's in one stage of your life, and maybe not repeating it 20 years later, because it may no longer be the right time, unless you want. And that can be said of so many other people. So that, in this respect, I'm absolutely ordinary. But because Italy is such an exposed country to one hazard as seismic hazard, for instance, well, then one might point out that it is unfortunate that the Earth sciences as a whole are not a premier tool as they are, in fact, of not just funding, but the public discourse, and that's the weak point, not just in Italy, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the students and in geosciences are not exception. They are facing these difficulties in getting funds for anything, for special, I think, for bachelor degrees in many countries where it's like expensive and not for free. And of
Absolutely.
course, once you move up the ladder, is like you become a master and PhD and postdoc. Institutions want you more and more, but at the same time, of course, it's connected with moving to the other country because it's pretty logical to get experience in the other country, and like that, these are other limitations because there is other currency or whatever. So yeah, I guess like if one decides to put their life on the line of academic career, it's not easy, but it's fulfilling, right?
Absolutely. It is and then it also uh, mm, mm, I, I'm speaking for myself, so it may be a bit a personal of a personal outlook, which these conversations are about, in fact. But at the same time, it's not so personal. It's actually generational. There may be a time in one's life, for instance, in one scientist's life, but it doesn't. It's not necessarily connected to science, although science is a particularly advantaged tool, intellectual tool to where to move from. Um, it may come a time when uh, um, your self-propelling force kicks in, may kick in a novel fashion, and lead you to take even greater sacrifices, uh, but of a different quality. Um, uh, Aiming for uh, not just uh, these special results, in fact, to embrace all the results. So rather than to move vertically, so to say, it's a matter of expanding laterally, which may conflict, which does conflict with the way science disciplines are organized. Well, beginning with the name disciplines, so disciplinary funding for disciplines, um, uh, journals to publish on, which adhere to niches, which is understandable, of course. But uh, any we are more and more being asked to be multi something, whatever you can call, whatever you place in, you put in place of something, interdisciplinary thinking. It doesn't really matter. It's a sort of a buzzword, but then it risks of being an empty buzzword if it is not uh, accompanied, or in fact uprooted and brought up upwards from an intellectual collective shift. It takes nothing it's not, it's just a nice word to say, oh, getting outside of the silos. Yes, of course. And when do you do this? And when because then you risk of repeating nice buzzwords, and instead it's a matter of rolling up sleeves and getting out there one way. Then you discover that there are many other people who are doing the exact same and wandering around. How can we try to not just do it, but think about how to possibly get to do it. So it's a bit of an adventure, and as you mentioned, it becomes different, becomes a uh, fully absorbing, maybe too much absorbing, as we were saying at the beginning, adventure. Um, when you realize that you have to put that extra effort to get out of yourself in one way, of your old self, so to say, maybe out of your discipline.
Yeah, that's useful to do it sometimes, and yeah, I mean, I would love to talk more about it, and maybe down the line we'll have an opportunity to pivot back to it. But now I really want to talk more about the areas of your research, and the first one of them, of course, is the coastal city risks, the risk to which they are exposed, because your recent work focuses heavily on the accrued vulnerabilities of coastal megacities facing compound risks. So, when you look at modern urban planning, what is the single most overlooked geophysical stressor that city planners are completely ignoring right now?
In my perception, uh, it's it's not just one stressor, although one key stressor is could be and is sea level rising, or the patterns of in the of sea level rise, spatially and time wise. They look surprising, but that's also because we are until a few years ago, we collectively failed to consider, once again, the human factor, to the point where it becomes a geophysical an ingredient. That's why coastal megacities come into enter enter the game. They did not 50 years ago, in part because they were spotty and relatively few, for a number of reasons which are connected to the history of the 20th century. But again, for a number of reasons which have to deal with the history of the 20th century, especially the second half, uh, uh, well, population has been quite bouncing, and people don't live on the trees, live somewhere, hopefully and luckily. And would they live in tents, or would they prefer to live in cities? Well, the answer goes without saying. Would they live away from the water, whatever you mean by water, a lake, a river, the seaside, maybe? Well, no, of course. And then you just roll back today to the what is contemporary Iraq and Iran in the valleys of the Tigris and the Euphrates, and which must be a fantastic then physiographic and allegory, if you will. You are in a place which today conveys only overheating, which is true. In Basra, temperatures can reach 54 degrees Celsius today, which is unthinkable. But certainly they were not the case in 5 or 6 thousand years ago. And when that was, even away from the sea, much away from the sea, was a hub of a contemporary Indo-European civilization. And that's it. I could stop there. Water is, of course, fundamental for humans, even when it's the sea, because even if you cannot drink it, you can have the goods that you need, and then there can be a river, because we have a motto in Italian which applies to any language: the water rolls to the sea. Okay, so if you are on the seaside, if it's not here, over there must be a river, even a trickle, and you go and you drink there. So the proportion in which population growing, enormously growing population, have been accumulating on cities which have been more and more colossally large, not just cities, even megacities, 15, 20, 30 million inhabitants, poses an entirely different set of complexities from a urban planning and viewpoint, but especially add weight. Something that before I read a beautiful paper by Tom Parsons in 2020 about the weight of the weight of civilizations. I must admit I was dismayed, but I was very wrong, of course. It is a little unthinkable. No, come on. I mean, the geological forces do not have that sort of wavelength. They may, and they may especially on than on coastal areas, not just on rock. I mean, you don't build on rocky cliffs. You may, but you don't. You on low-lying coastal and the flooding and the river flooding areas themselves prone to hazards due to the incoming drainage pattern and intrinsic hazards, and so you're not exactly building on firm land, but you're accruing natural subsidence. But the sea in front of you is also rising, so you're adding an extra weight today, which can be recorded by Sentinel, whatever, to a point where we wouldn't have thought. So you are lowering the level of the ground zero of the building, of the built environment, and in front of you, let's make a simplification, of course, but in front of you, the sea level rises. Your sea level is rising. Also, most of these large megacities are in one section of the Earth, which is Southeastern Asia. And is Southeastern Asia devoid from any other geophysical hazards? Well, no. It is the land of earthquakes of enormous global relevance. And the Indian Ocean is not exactly famous for and for being a calm and tranquil sea. On the other hand, it is home to a number of areas where earthquake sources are very relevant and can give and have given rise to the, seismically originated tsunamis of enormous extent. So you need to build. You need to build. You need to accommodate people. People want to get to the and there's no nothing will stop this. And it's a human. It's not a pretense. I mean, it's a human wish. But we cannot let it happen without thinking about the material consequences. As we are speaking right now, Jakarta is being rebuilt. I don't know, probably it will be finished by 2040. I don't know exactly when. Uh, you can rebuild the city. And by the way, Cairo too is being rebuilt. So we cannot if sea level is one major stressor, the people around there are the novel stressor in ways that bend the mind a little. That requires that requires an extra, an entirely little different layer of thinking, of intellectual and the scientific thinking.
Yeah, I mean it's really important, and I wish that many city planners they at least have this large picture notion of what is going on, what is going to happen, and that they are contributing to building the structures that will be and building the cities that will live beyond their lifetimes and for several generations in the future. So definitely what you're saying, they probably have to attend your lecture or something like that to have this big picture in their mind when they do that, when the engineers do every action down the road. So
Well, I think I'm pretty sure that in fact that the motion even at the intergovernment and the multinational level is it's definitely set. For instance, the IPCC is just about to release its special report on cities, which will be a fundamental work. I've been lucky on being one of the reviewers for another IPCC report, and so the keywords are all there. One difficulty that remains in embedded intrinsic in these large reports is the fact that they are large reports. Even syntheses of those large reports are big, as big as this. I mean, I'm a bit exaggerating now, but I'm not that far from reality. The even titles are complex, and also, by the way, I chosenly made example of the intergovernmental the panel on climate change because it is not an international, but it's intergovernmental, which then has to compensate with temperaments and uh, the way governments see their commitment. And each government can have a different outlook. Even well-meant governments or governments that do not want to hide the dust under the carpet. Still, it is a delicate matter. So those reports such as the IPCC reports, are quintessential in displaying the amount of science that there is behind, which is colossal, breathtaking, of a fantastic level, and at the same time, the equally more colossal amount of complexities that these working groups, which are beautifully diverse, need to negotiate when it comes to wording science, the most refined science, into uh, mm, a briefing that may suit at the same time uh, governmental bodies that may be just opposing one another. And you have to try and stitch a word or an adjective uh, in a way that may work, or in a way that can be at least released. So that's why in our exchange leading to this beautiful conversation, I said all hands on deck, because it really very much is a physical commitment, an intellectual and physical commitment into making things work one way or another, or in fact, one way and the other. Better said. Then one has to decide which one the one wants to pick. But then again, one way.
Yes, yes. It's yeah, it's hard to choose one way. And you mentioned also the intergovernmental panel on climate change, and talking about climate change and ice melting. I have another question for you. You have branched out into studying thawing permafrost and its geopolitical and greenhouse gas implications. So please tell us more about it. And also, how does a seismologist by training bring a unique visual or analytical lens to permafrost dynamics that traditional atmospheric or climate scientists might miss?
It's an excellent question. And I'll be okay. There are two levels in which I can answer this question. The On the first side, on the first part of your question, I got to perm until a few years ago. Permafrost was to me something up there in the north,
Yeah.
whatever we mean by north. Northern than I could mean that I could mean or
Arctic,
think.
Arctic, something like
Yes,
that. Yeah.
yes, yes, and the Arctic up there,
Yeah.
uh, as if in and this sort of concept or lack of thought, in fact, was hiding another an after in a sort of preconception, an unconscious preconception. It doesn't. I'm not affected by permafrost. It's up there. I'm not saying who cares, but I mean there are other issues in the world, which is true. It is true, but it's also wrong. The As a geologist, as a somebody, as an earthquake geologist, first of all, I was fascinated by the patterns of the of the surface breaking, which occur or may occur locally when depending uh, on the various parameters in the the active layer thickness of permafrost being undergoing thawing, then the upper terrain, like 1 or 2 meters above, can crack in ways that are so much reminiscent of in part, of the complexities that sometimes um, uh, active faulting may cause on the ground surface when daylighting on when daylighting on the ground surface. Of course, in permafrost environment, this is an aerial. pattern. So areal extent and areal patterns as well. So that adds an enormous layer of of geometric sophistication. But I was stuck by the geometry, and I thought to myself, well, how on earth is it possible that then geologists are not involved in this? They are, but only a small number. Because of course it is a glaciological, merely glaciological, or used to be a glaciological issue. Now it no longer is, and that's the point. This is why it could have been just a glaciological issue whose glaciologists were dealing with. So I should not be worrying too much about it. It is not no longer, because it affects areas which are which are far more diverse and far more scattered than one can think of, or than I could think of. The area and the area undergoing covered by permafrost is now I can't recall the exact proportion, but it stretches up to 25% of the northern in the hemisphere. Clearly, it's not one single stretch naturally, and we're talking about the Arctic and the basin, of course. So which used to be covered by year-long ice pack, and is no longer the case, at least locally, and conceivably this phenomenon will only increase over over this century, opening a novel set of complexities of just any kind. Uh, for very, and there really is no reason to recall that the Arctic basin is of course shared by Canada, Greenland, the Fennoscandia, and well, then Russia, and although it doesn't face there, of course, China is far below, but has, being China a colossal, perhaps today the number one shipyarding colossus globally, at least in terms of production of tankers and sea shipping and the seafaring ships. China does have an interest, and it's totally understandable. So the picture will change under our own eyes. In the And that's where the second part comes, because um, it it used to be or it may have used to be, it may have used to be a primarily glaciological issue. The wish to study the phenomenon. Okay, and I understand it, of course, because it is fascinating, and especially as it used to be confined or more or less affecting in a region. In fact, um, uh, sensible thawing in permafrost region has been occurring for the last 60 years, not yesterday. And so then again, there must have been a lack of communication or lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, certainly, across the geoscience community, because this should have been a matter of a far larger discourse in the geosciences, and it seems to me that it hasn't been so. So then again, there could have been a lot of lost time over the last few years or decades, and then because of the dynamics of towing, and so the affect the how it affects the infrastructure on the ground surface is something that unavoidably people who deal with seismic hazard are knowledgeable of. And so that in itself is sufficient to say why earth scientists, why geoscientists, and why geologists, why seismologists may want to have something to say about this, or to discuss about, and entering the discussion. And for instance, and as geoscience, as a geoscientist interested and over in the when I was in the UK, involved in subsurface geology. Well, the the novel access that will be slowly be granted by Thawing, by unfreezing and access to Arctic coasts, especially on the Russian border, but the Canadian too, of course, opens up new possible ventures in hydrocarbon exploration. For a geodynamic reason, similar to for a geodynamic reason, the Arctic basin is somehow a large backcountry basin, somehow comparable to the Gulf of Mexico. Although they have an entirely different aspect, but compared to the North American pattern, they somehow are cousins, so to say. And so it's no surprise that the Arctic basin is endowed by a remarkable hydrocarbon and at least estimates and those will be more and more accessible, which then requires understanding the feasibility, volumes, and then deciding where do you build on an infrastructure to, for instance, if one wants to exploit those resources. If you we just said that the terrain is difficult to be relied on. Well, how do you build an infrastructure, even just a port, because of sea level rising, of course. So you touch one thing and 10 more dismantled. Not to mention, we said we were talking about IPCC and scenarios, or the various scenarios. We've all been reading that the worst case scenario has been lowered in probability. Okay, that's not a bad news. Okay, let's put it like this. Doesn't mean that it is a good news, and not at all. And however, permafrost thawing is exposing or can expose in a proportion of difficult to estimate and methane and entrapped in the upper part of permafrost and of thawing ice, which may send most of the estimates out of the table, in part because methane is a greenhouse gas far more potent than carbon dioxide, 30 to 80 times more active. So that in itself is an enormous question mark. Not to mention the potential pathogens, which date to thousands of years ago, which, if unleashed and if circulating, might find us contemporary human beings totally unprepared biologically to those pathogens. Now, this is clearly something very much outside of our tools. But then again, which hazard comes first? Which is more hazardous? Which should be tackled first? It's not easy to answer this question. So that's one in that sort of tables, so to say, geoscientists need to be there.
Sure, it's really great that you share this perspective about the risk and about possibilities in even like petroleum production.
Oh yeah,
Uh, it's like it's there are pros and cons, but again, if we talk
of
about
course.
petroleum production, that it also affects probably negatively more than positively the our humanity.
Of
Well,
course, of
yeah,
course, of
yeah.
course.
It's
Then it
like
depends on the actors because some actors may, or some governments may or may be less or more prone to decide to go ahead no matter what, and for a number of reasons, and which in the end, as revolves around the tools of 21st century geopolitics, which are the same that have been in since the age of since the beginning of times, after all, which is space, money, resources. Nothing really very much changed. It's not that the Roman Empire expanded because they were getting, I don't know, let's go and conquer Britannia, you know. And there were very very precise imperial reasons. And contemporary news teach us very starkly that this continues to be the case in various forms. So the control of resources, of Earth resources, is, as was, is, and will be even more instrumental in deciding some of the ingredients of the geopolitical arrangement of the future. Whatever we say, whatever we conceive, whatever we may decide to think or not, this is going to happen. So Earth scientists were fundamental for the first for the industrial revolutions. Of course, we can blame coal and the slightly excessive use of coal. Yes, yes, of course. And the same applies to hydrocarbons or to a way of over exploiting hydrocarbons. But we've been there as an intellectual community. The knowledge, the sensitivity towards the Earth's fragilities, the fragilities in the Earth system at in various dimensions and across time and space, which is something which is the bread and butter of geoscientists. From milliseconds to million years, we got it all, no problem. In our set of added value knowledge cannot be out of the table, even in evaluating the role of the let's call them geopolitical fault lines. Fault lines, okay, we know what they are. They do have an extra added value, which which has to be considered. It would be very unwise to not make a collective effort into bringing our knowledge into, I don't know what the verb to use, not control because it's impossible, evidently, but advice that could, or try to advise. At least that could be a viable, conceivable effort. Okay, then let's do it.
sure. I totally agree for this cooperation and for uniting the brain trust. And generally, it's really interesting to talk about geopolitics. And I want to pivot to that topic now because you've been very vocal about recent geopolitical shifts affecting science infrastructure, such as the sudden cancellation of major US federal grants, like the National Institute of Health Directors Early Independence Award, and the political targeting of academic institutions. You also mentioned those. So, for an early career researcher, watching these events unfold, what is your raw advice on how to build a resilient scientific career in such a volatile political climate?
I'll sound very surprising, uh, but then not. Um, just a couple of days ago, I watched beautiful talk by Yuval Noah Harari, which is such a remarkable mind, of course. And that he was in that interview, in that lecture, he was recalling about the fact that never have we been knowing the future, of course, and this is even all the more now. So, in shielding one's future against something which is yet to come is nobody's task. However, he mentioned, and it is a matter of evidence, of course, he recalled an evidence that one thing is pretty much for certain: what makes us human. So our unforeseen idea, our contradictory idea, our error, which turns out not to be a mistake, or yes, a mistake, but then has a repercussion which goes beyond any projection. And because it goes against any projection, it goes against any algorithm. Now, this could sound a bit of a bold statement because, and of course, it goes far beyond my competencies. But if there is one way that you don't, that you can fail is to try and imitate somebody or something that does things better than you. There's no point. A statistical model will have an edge, okay, and for a good reason, by the way. In fact, we already I've been using it for the last few years. In fact, oh, and all and as the days go by, even more and more to the fruit of to the benefit of humans. So that's fantastic. But because earth sciences are changing, in part because of machine learning, but not just because of machine learning, which can be a revolutionary thing. Yes, maybe a revolutionary thing. But sciences have been changed in as much as there is less and less people doing science. That's the catastrophe, the human intellectual catastrophe we have in a population which is growing, although it is globally going to stabilize by mid-century, which still has to come anyway. We have a collapse in university subscription and enrollments, and particularly in science, for a number of complex reasons which cannot be solved now here. So what probably could make an edge is to not just major in one discipline, expecting it to be your discipline. No, that's certainly something not to pursue in terms of I don't know, loyalty to a discipline, but rather into uh, upgrowing near one's science fascination. In this case, one geoscience fascination, geomorphology. I don't know. I was raised as a geomorphologist, and there's no surprise. The world out there is the first thing I see is probably just a number of it. Everyone has his or her own fascinations. In my case, it was geomorphology. But others get entrapped for and enamored with microfossils, which hold a world away, which is fantastic and probably teach a lot about they teach a lot about human environments and in fact are overly precious. So, for instance, um, is geomorphology per se practical, and will it ensure you a position? Hmm. I would be cautious. Or is micropaleontology on the other way around be such? Maybe not. Maybe, in fact, something more subtle. Learning from microfossils the how crucial the shifting living environments are and the tiny changes that intervene into living environments to alter conditions to a point where entire taxa are wiped away in one paleontological day. Sometimes can be a very almost a day, almost in geological in the time series, and or the geomorphologist out there is well today the many of well more than one Earth scientist familiar with landscape is crucial to, for instance, the sighting of windmills, and for a very good reason, of course, because they know landscape. So, if geomorphology is used to study the morphological types, okay, that's the first day, but make it useful for an application for which people will go and need you, not just because you know the classifying of landscape or any other tool and parameters you can observe, but how you can translate those parameters into something which is of use. Um, Basic and applied sciences have been fundamental to one another, but these days and today and the day after tomorrow, it will be a life and death the choice. And I'm saying it in the negative sense. I'm saying it in the positive sense. Humans are exposed to hazards. When we said at the beginning, of course they are. Do you want to be useful? Think about then where humans live. Think about the kind of hazards they are exposed to, especially the ones they do not know or do not care. And the effort is in go in, out there and convince them, which is fatiguing. Okay, welcome on board.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for this really great advice, and it's really important to know that in current changing climate and mm, like like economy goes hand in hand with the geopolitics, and we talk about geopolitics, and now. I want to really receive your comment on the something that you mentioned earlier in your research, in your communications. You recently highlighted the economic reality that every dollar invested in National Weather Service yields $73 of public value, which is like huge improvement in terms of investments. So, if the return of investment for geosciences is so obvious, why do earth scientists consistently lose the budget argument with governments, and how do we change our pitch?
Yeah, that has to do with the um, um, planned and fortunately suspended decision of quitting of squashing NCAR, one of most fantastic NOAA's branches in the US. And carbon is fundamental for a number of climate and applications from including the National Weather Forecast and the National Weather Service, which has a a dollar size and estimate and sorry whose effect for instance, on agriculture, on precision agriculture, which in the US is something large because, I mean, it's not the tiny cornfield in Italy. It's millions of acres. So it does make a difference. And it has already been employed, and squashing it would have meant a loss of turnaround. Not to mention the loss of or the depletion of the quality of the yield, which is in which is an astonishing repercussion. Luckily, this has been squashed. This has been avoided for the moment. I don't know about the future. That erupted a cry for a global cry. So although I'm an Italian citizen, I am a citizen of this world, and I felt outraged by this risk. So which is why I joined my tiny voice into this collective cry. The but then you say the funding is totally inconsistent with with the relevance, inescapable relevance of what we just briefly mentioned, or that we made a few tiny examples of. Well, I think that communication in this really does have a word to say, which means we have a word to say into understanding how to say less science and more convincing keywords. Now, of course, this is enormous. It cannot be done in one day. But I know one thing, and I've used it in a few presentations. Um, uh, um, I mentioned it at the beginning of our conversation. The literature can produce, or art as a whole can produce. But let's take to literature. So the use of words can produce fantastic messages, which are which are absolutely captivating, and that you cannot ignore. That speak to anybody's heart. That hit exactly where it is softer. Why? Because evidently those who are involved, well, they do it for a trade, they do it for a living. They know the tools. And not just know the tools. They are the ones that we recall are magisterial. I make it in one in a few last year I used for a presentation an idea that came to my mind from the one of the scenes in the movie the Blues Brothers, when the Blues Brothers are in the tunnel, and and I can't remember the name of the actress, the one who's personating Layla in the Star Wars. Okay, now I can recall her name. She has a bazooka. She, she's, the scene is going to be end to end bad. They make it out of it. Well, although the example is a comical movie and a great movie, one of the movies which has been at all more than and I don't know, it's ranks, I don't know, like in the first five movies in in cinema's histories for turnaround. um uh well, I know it's a comical movie, but the kind of messaging was so hyperbolic, so so fantastic. The and also the characters, of course, the actors. Needless to say, that an overstacking of accumulating hazards. Uh, I couldn't. I ran out of gas. There was an earthquake. Even the locusts. I had a friend visiting from away. A number of independent hazards, which were accruing on one spot in one time, and the system the overflew. Okay. However, the clearly I have no idea whether John Landis had the thought about this sort of effect. I've been trying to get in touch with him, but I got no reply. I should ask Dan Aykroyd because he was there and see if he replies on Instagram. But the unspoken, whether chosen or not, message was that no matter how complex the stack of hazards begin, and there must be a way out, which requires a fantastic leap. Now that's a movie, of course. Reality is slightly more complicated, more expensive, more troublesome, more dangerous, more everything. Okay, I know it. We know it. Because we all know it, uh, can we learn something out of that lesson? Is there a communication lesson? I think so. A couple of years ago, I think CNBC produced, or no, sorry, the BBC produced a short series in which they put John Oppenheimer, which at Columbia University, and the comedian to translate into daily jargon with all the profanities that are needed to make it work. The statements about global warming and hazards, and John Oppenheimer an emeritus geoscience professor at Columbia. Um, and the result was, well, I mean, you would roll. I was rolling in laughing because it worked very well. You don't need to get to profanities, although it may work. But there can be ways around, or ways to learn how to uh, m- communicate the complexities in ways that are not complex, but that hit you exactly where you are exposed. And they are there. No, 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 the comedian used to make examples about the skyrocketing and insurance and then home insurance, of course, because in places like California or Texas, go and pay the skyrocketing in the insurance prices against earthquake hazard or hurricane hazard or elsewhere. Of course, they are. And so you may ignore them, but they will hit in your pocket. Now, what do you like more? Do you like your pocket? Well, then be considerate, because people are sneaking dollars out of your pocket and you don't even know why. Well, do you want to know why? Maybe so. Now, this is easy to say in the moment, but uh, communicating risk in general uh, is something that requires the consideration of the human factor. You're talking to humans, not to people which are all alike, because they're not all alike. There's no such thing as the general public. No. Luckily, there's no such thing as a general public. We are pretty diverse, which is great. Of course, we have to synthesize and simplify, which doesn't mean oversimplifying or um, or on the other way around, talking classy because it adheres to our ego, which is understandable in people who have been spending time in doing science, fatiguing enough. You are the professor, you want to look like a professor. Okay, I understand. Then it depends on whom you're talking to. If it's in a conference, maybe, and even there, take you take it easy. Uh, but if you want your message to be convincing to out there, go and ask out there. And you find difficulties that you may not have been valued enough, and then it's the case to do that because you are the general public to something else. No, during the pandemic, we were all general public receiving information from the World Health Organization and the local authorities. And we were all stunned, to say the least. Also feeling lost, understandably. We are here. Humans made it through with with enormous costs and effects to this day, in fact. But uh, but it was not the first time that humanity went throughout enormous complexities, and it will not be the last either. Um, so even that, because that's the way it is. That's the way it is. Being considerate towards humans for what they undergo, it's one entry point. I'm not saying that it is the only, or of course it is a suite of attempts, but that should be center stage, I believe.
Sure, I totally agree with you. And about communication, and actually, my next question is connected with communication because you strongly, and it also pivot backs to the natural disasters question that we discussed early in
Oh
the
yeah,
beginning of our interview. Yes, so you strongly champion the stance that there are no natural disasters, only human disasters.
yeah.
So, why is the specific linguistic distinction a matter of life and death? And how do we retrain the global media to stop blaming nature for human engineering and planet failures?
An enormous question. Well, the on the first part of your question, the misconception is dangerous because it places uh, uh, the uh, the masterminding of disasters, of this thing called disaster, and then we'll be there. We'll go back to the word in a minute. To an outer cause out there, nature or whatever. And even a war is a disaster, and there's nothing natural about it. Or I don't know, a meteorite which is not going to hit us anytime soon, at least not in the catastrophic movies outset. Um, in fact, it's what we have not done, although advised to keep track of what is known about the factors that may affect us. The one um, one very well informed scientist on this matter is Ilan Kellman, works at University College London, and he's a remarkable and very knowledgeable, extremely knowledgeable advocate of what disasters are not. And in fact, that's even the wording is the disaster is, oh, okay, you get to the scene and it is a disaster. Hang on a minute. What really happened? One, if we think about the Karamamarash earthquake, or oh well, or even the La Guaira earthquake, which are more far more in closer in time, the consequences have been disastrous. Yes, but the knowledge about La Guaira faults and the faulting associated with the Caribbean plate, which, by the way, we are exactly at the southern point of the southern tip, southern edge of the Caribbean plate. Then 16 years later, than the Haiti 2010 earthquake, which was turned out to be a disaster, not because the earthquake was disastrous, which of course was a very high magnitude earthquake, very energetic one, as is the combination of the seismic moment due to the La Guaira doublet, but because the built environment was unbuilt, the social context was uh, uh, everything but cohesive. Now I'm trying to find I'm trying to select my wording very much. I could say it in a very different way, but but we all got the message. And in watching the effects of high and highly energetic events in La Guaira, what we witnessed is not just the high energy, which is out of question, because it's a datum, okay, it's a recording, but the behavior of those buildings in that area, that is not acceptable. That caused the disastrous outcome. It could have led to victims and extreme and partial disruptions, but collapsing, having the 10 stories, recent buildings collapsing in matters of seconds, that is beyond any conception of acceptable. And not all the more in a famously geologically active country where there is no dispute. On top of that, with the geoscience community, which is fabulous, just fabulous. Maria Angela Capello is one such great representative, but there are she's very active with AGU, APG, SCG, and is a known voice, and especially on the knowledge about the subsurface of Venezuela, which is endowed with hydrocarbons, of course, and the geological risks associated with that terrain. Well, it is all pretty much known. But then we have to be realistic with the place with the confines of the place where it happened. And by the way, I'm Italian, and I know too well and too unacceptably that periodic earthquakes, which are entirely different magnitude and then and energy and magnitude and in the our the or the Italian territory have effects which are far greater than they should, or despite the fact that Italy probably was the first to have a proto seismic hazard map, designed by Torquato Taramelli in 1888. So this is intellectually unacceptable. The a phrase that bridges to the second part of your question. In 1570, there was an earthquake occurring in northeastern Italy, in the city of Ferrara. Although the earthquake was only and the was not so not so probably not so energetic, at least that's the deduction from the damage that we can retrospectively do today. The damage was there was a devastation. Luckily enough, one of the guests from outside of city, which was a pretty rare thing in those days, was Pirro Ligorio. He was an architect from Naples. I don't know the reason why it was in town, but the lords of Ferrara got news about his presence, and it charged him with redrawing the city, replanning the city in such a way that it could withstand any similar occurrence. And the one key phrase of his report, we would say today, is defending the landscape from earthquakes is a must of the human in ingenuity. This was 1570, almost 5 centuries ago. And there are even earlier stances of that elsewhere, so it can be avoided. And that's where if it can be avoided, at least in the way it turns out, then what is a disaster, and why is a disaster there at all? There is a beautiful paper by O'Keefe et al. In 1976. I think it was either on Science or Nature, I can't recall now, which is beautifully titled "Taking the Naturalness Out of Natural Disasters." It dates to 50 years ago. So I'm absolutely, I'm not saying anything new. And by the way, even Mami Mizutori, which was the head of IRDRR, a UN agency involved with disaster risk research, stated this clearly in full during a UN meeting, a UN assembly, General Assembly. So, it's out there. Why do the news word fails to absorb this information? I think because it's a bit complicated to use an equivalent of it. Natural disaster is quick, works, rings well. What would you say? A disaster outset out of unplanned the effects of a natural cause, a natural hazard. It's a mouthful. The TV, the news are already on the news is already evaporated. So it's complicated to find an equivalent. More than searching an equivalent is understanding that we have got it is in our hands of avoiding disasters for the way disasters are. Hazards are going to be there and effects are going to be there. some effects can turn out to be disastrous in as much as they leave you powerless. Okay, that cannot be accepted. We cannot reduce ourselves and let that an occurrence, a natural occurrence, reduces us powerless in the 21st century. No, I mean we can do better.
Sure, sure. I totally agree with you, and thank you for your insight. And you mentioned many scientists who promoted these aspects of geosciences, and one of them actually was female. So I want to pivot to another topic because you recently highlighted the stark reality that women make up only 34% of researchers and a mere 9% of inventors in the EU, calling gender equity an existential matter for our common good. So, from your vantage point of view as a senior researcher, what structural barrier actually must the geoscience community dismantle first to radically change these numbers?
Well, I I am afraid that it goes to say something a little obvious it goes certainly outside of the remit of geosciences, of sciences, in fact, and has to do very much with the way even Western societies work, have been working. So, in fact, it's a slap in the face of us all in in acknowledging that clearly there is um, a broken or just missing link in the collective cohesion of humans, and there's no other way to say this. It's a male problem. No, there's no sweet words around here. No sweet words are allowed. It's a male problem. And it has to do with the societies at large, of course. From a science viewpoint, sacrifices I earlier at the beginning, and I spoke when you asked me about the hurdles. I spoke about the sacrifices that one may want to do or not, or to embark on or accept. I spoke as a young kid, and had I been a young girl after graduating, maybe I would have had a further stack, an enormous, completely and larger and broader stack of questions to ask myself. What do I? What are my plans for the future? What are well that was my question too, of course. Um, but there are slightly other factors, and uh, I've been lucky in not witnessing any wrongdoings, any uh, circumstance that has directly, I mean, prevented female scientists to pursue their wish along the various stages that I've been, and even the countries that I've been studying in Italy earlier, and then later on in the UK, in France, for a few brief stages in the US. So I would be untruthful if I said that there was no seeming equality. Now, that seeming equality had, however, which was truthful, upscale when at a larger scale must have not paid off at some stage, And by the way, now that we're thinking about it, a few months ago, one year back or so, a very intelligent scientist who was interviewing me for one of the written contributions on EOS. She mentioned that okay, she had pursued a science career and then decided on otherwise. So to raise a family problem, okay. So she had to relinquish her science commitment. She told me about the fact that was out of her preference to better manage herself, that she didn't, I mean, she felt totally okay with it. Okay, that was in her case, okay, it's okay. But maybe we lost collectively somebody, her in this case herself, who I don't know, maybe could have turned out to be pretty, uh, could have gifted that with something that we do not have. So maybe in her own case, she may feel at ease with the choice, and uh, but with bigger numbers, uh, uh, that cannot be an easy choice. No, it cannot be. The number of enrollments and the number of the roles in general, especially at the as the ranks getting higher in the ranks in the universities or in the boards where we decide where decisions are being taken. Um, just like James Brown's the song is it's a man's word. Um, Now a little less so, but still very much and unacceptably too much because we collectively lose preciousness. And not just because it is fairer, which is not even to be said. It's not a matter of being fair. Fair for what? Against towards whom? And who in the world are we to decide what is fair? Come on. It's a matter of uh, desiring that we are all on board, wishing, battling for to having an any of us on board. And I'm saying any of us willingly. I'm not just making it a matter of gender, which of course it is, but it's not just that. Um, n- it's also including the all the array of diversities which nourish the world out there, as long as the world out there is receptive, or at least a bit receptive. The world out there is complex, exactly because it is complex. The inconsistencies, the fuzziness of humans, which can be problematic, is in itself a very safe harbor when it comes to dealing with complexities which will never have one single solution. You have diversities of many kinds. There, from that melting pot, you can obtain just the best or the human best, which proves to do something good. So, but let it do it.
Yeah.
And I know that it's very, 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 very complex. Also because, well, again, I mean, it's a matter of social structure. But I mean, then here we are. So, and then it has to do even with us, even with the best of our intentions, our own respective intentions. So, speaking about myself too, even maybe even unwillingly or unknowingly. It's a hard, it's a task which can make the difference between having solutions or having not. Imagine being Marie Skłodowska, married Curie, uh, winning and being winning two, not just one, but two Nobel Prizes. And well, yes, but you cannot go because it's not really. Come on, I mean, I'll go and collect it for you. Don't worry. Well,
Yeah.
now it will no longer happen today. That today it would be an outrage. But then other forms of discriminations stepped in. Mm, there's always room for complication. Um, and if geoscience, which is endowed with the tools of deciphering the complexities of the Earth system, is not forefront in this stance, then what else science and environment shouldn't? Of course, it is up to us, but we've been talking about uh, milliseconds to million years, uh, angstrom to parsec, mm, the I don't know, the chemical bonds to quasars. It's in our in with such a grand such grand scenery, mental scenery. um, shouldn't we be at the forefront of it's such a change? I think we really should.
Yes, I totally agree with you, and I thank you for this strong uh, pro women, pro diversity position. We really need more giant scientists like that to promote it and to yeah, make geosciences more equal place to everyone. And uh, I want to again talk about communication because that's really important and interesting for me, and also like art and music, and it seems that you do too. So what I want to mention is that, and yeah, I think it's Johnny Cash on your T-shirt, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I recognize him. Yeah. So your writing seamlessly weaves in references to literature, history, and musicians like Frank Sinatra and Earth, Wind, and Fire. So why do you think so many geoscientists struggle to integrate the humanities into their scientific discourse? And how does embracing art make us better interpreters of the Earth?
Well, I think that it is scientists in general, probably, and their scientists would make no difference, are a little uh, jealous of their preeminence, their intellect, their science preeminence, their discovery path. I mean, it's understandable, but then flying low, flying a bit lower is never hurts no one. So, uh, mm, it, yes, of course, your science contribution is why you are there, but uh, uh, don't let it coincide with yourself. And that can be said of anything in fact, or of any human endeavor. So if in this case her scientists accept that if they realize that their message may not strike through if it is not uh, considerate of the humans on the other side, which may be just at AGU in a room packed with other scientists, with other science fellows, uh, up there exactly to listen to your contribution. Yeah, of course. Okay, but it doesn't have to. There is a a fine line, or if you wish it, there is a hazy fine line between being serious and playing serious. Um, you have to be serious. You have to be credible because you are serious. But as the motto goes, playing is for serious people. Um, Being playful, so to say, is not uh, uh, is not just fancy. Is, if properly crafted, and there's a science behind it, in fact, is a tool of conveying serious messages in lowering the defenses, so to say, of your audience, which may be pretty diverse. So you may want to decide that you're talking only to the most involved ones. Okay, and what about the lower room, lower part of the room, the noisier part? How do you embark them? Maybe you find somebody who then comes and knocks on your shoulder and say, "Hey, listen, I was talking about this. How did you get the idea?" Well, let's discuss about it. That's what congresses are for, in fact. For instance, so um, there is no problem, not a problem of compromising your seriousness. It's a matter of conveying it. If you if you switch or migrate or broaden, enlarge your mindset to consider that uh, science messages do not require uh, overloading people, but in fact, it benefits from synthesizing in a considerate manner. Then there are tricks, there are tools, and these tools are not, once again, they're not just apples from the trees, and there's no wheel being reinvented. There are tools which are broadly discussed in all science endeavors. Last In 2025's EGU in Vienna, there were something like 12 or 13 sessions on games in geosciences. 12 to 13 sessions. And I assume that there were as many in at IGUs. And it will be all the time like this from now on, because communicating and getting hold of people's attention is these days and from now and until forever the issue, or one of the issues. You can It's not a matter of writing, I don't know, the Einstein's in equation with its elegance, and then the we all know it. In fact, it is graphically appealing. We are not required to know general no, relative theory or relativity. I would the last one, the last capable one, of course. Uh, mm, um, but we see it and it conveys the message. No problem. Then, if you want to know, then you go and ask or study a particle theory, particle physics, and if you really want. The the second part was on how to incorporate these messages. For instance, well, there is ample research now on how to strive in doing this. For instance, Lucia Perez, who is a great geo contributor, has been developing the art of drafting to accompany her presentation, and then realized that she could make a business out of it. So chapeau to her ingenuity. And one message that's stuck with me is that nobody is Raffaello, of course, and it's not required. You're not required to be Raffaello. So I personally, my drawing is these are my drawing capabilities. I am horrible at drawing. I'm okay with cross sections, but even there, the fluidity. I mean, I've got other colleagues whom I envy terribly because uh, they have such a gentle hand, which I do not have. But her point was, don't worry, uh, and use simple messaging. Simplicity pays better, and even awkwardness, if well crafted, meaning presented as awkwardness, not presented as something that got out of your hand and that turned out to be awkward. I mean, you have to convey that you are willing to use your awkwardness. So awkwardness is a message, sort of a meta message, if you will, that requires thinking. Now, that a little extra effort communicates in unspoken manner, which is what drawing is made for, by the way, the kind of gentle approach to what you're trying to convey. So, gentle science was also one of Lucia Perez's very wise points. And and that again has to do with, I suppose, that only somebody like Lucia, who happens to be a lady, could have come with, and I had the courage, by the way, to say something like that. Now, I don't remember the exact wording, but I remember that the gentle science, and there's plenty of other colleagues, female colleagues in elsewhere in science, cooperating in a beautiful manner to sort of lower down the white paper and the Times New Roman scripting, because where everything has to be serious. Because in wanting to be serious, you may not necessarily be taken seriously. Now, it's a word game, but is it a word game? You decide for yourself. And when your next presentation is full of fancy numbers and long statements, conclusions, which read this long. Come on, give us a break. Okay, what's your conclusions? Okay, and then say it in 2 words. 2 words is fine. Then again, it's a matter of consideration. There's no way of getting a a message which you deem important if it has to be synthesized from this length. You have to be doing your homework first, selecting what is really important.
Yeah, sure. That's really like great advice, and also you have been mentioning a lot of your colleagues from all over the world throughout your interview, and now you get to actually mention someone who we can pin in the LinkedIn post with this interview. So, what was the best piece of advice you ever received from a fellow professional, whether it was a colleague or a mentor, and who specifically was the person who gave it to you?
Oh, yes. Uh, I remember it very, very fondly. It was 1998, so I was pretty rowdy, still a bit of a rowdy geoscientist. Or at least I was novel I was new to earthquake geology, coming from structural geology in the UK, and then during a beautiful summer course in summer school uh, in Luxembourg. The One of the teachers was Nicholas Ambraseys, one of the authors of Corruption Kills Bilam, and together, which he penned together with Roger Bilham, another magnificent seismologist. And Nicholas Ambraseys, which used to be even told me something. Well, if you want to learn something about the subject, you have to write a book about it, which at the moment I couldn't really decipher because I wasn't really involved into writing a book. But decades afterwards, that message, which had been stuck in the corner of my brain, floated back again when it was a matter of trying to writing into a cohesive form a project about this shift that we've been talking about, and this intellectual pivot, and and of course, writing it down or trying to writing it down in pieces is a colossal effort. Of course, as anybody who has done a PhD, so the all of us has experienced on and still has bruises and scars on one's skin, and the what it means. What does it mean? That you have to let it go. Then that of course you cannot know it. So, because you cannot know it, you go out there and scramble in your library or anywhere, and learn about pieces that you will need to supplement as a scientist your statements or your perception or even your conceptions, and to find what can be said, what can be then accompanied by earlier demonstrations or earlier evidence, or even challenging it. But it still departs from things that you have to necessarily look through in order to write them down in a cohesive manner that will work out. Because otherwise, there's no point. Which leads to also to go and probe other subdisciplines which may fall outside of of your field, even a lot of outside of your field, and then, of course, doing the most low-tech thing, but is to go and knock on somebody's door, which means writing and listen, I've read this beautiful paper of yours. Can you can you please help me to, because I'm far from another field. Can you please allow me to get in, how to decipher it, because I would need it to. I think I can mention it in a paper I'm writing, but I have to be. I don't want to make gross, stupid mistakes. Could you please? And that every time turns out to be something which is perceived as very rewarding, because especially when it comes from far afield in science, is gives an idea of resonance to the receiving scientist, which is which gives a beautiful perception of what science and mind and humans can do in trying to connect points which sit apparently away, but not necessarily that much away. And then anyway, even just getting a beautiful effort or discovering people and fantastically clever people. I had the immense privilege of just exchanging lines. I never met her. Jaya Syvitski. Uh, she's a monumental scientist, which has been studying primarily the deltas and the river deltas for UN and reports and so forth. It's from the height of her humility, uh, and it's a chosen seeming verbal contradiction. She told me that the best the ideas are those, if I remember well the wording well, are those whose evidence is unassailable through the test of time. Generally, she said, are those that other ideas of lesser relevance tend to have a shelf life of only a few decades. And I laughed to myself. I would love to have an idea whose shelf life is a few years. You mentioned about decades, and it is a bit delusional. Rest assured, the rest of the world is nowhere in sight. And I found it very, 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 very clever and very humble to be said by somebody of that insight. We even took time to answer me because I just wrote her. Listen, I stumbled on your profile. I went through a few titles. I was overwhelmed by the beauty of what came out. I just had to tell you. She had no idea. She took her time to write me to reply me in a long email, which was beautiful. And by the way, it's very enriching. And so, in fact, the if I may use Nicholas Ambraseys advice, one thing that I, of a much, much lower intellectual stance, um, because I'm not Nicholas Ambraseys, but one suggestion that I would make to any young scientist, or in fact, any scientist, is to keep track of their favorite, not artists, but favorite scientists, publications or mentions. Google Scholar allows this for this seamlessly. And it's a good, proficient, efficient, costless way of keeping track of being constantly, slightly intellectually challenged and or just having surprises. You never know what surprises may lead to. Sometimes beautiful things, even if not great, then you never know.
Sure. Wow. Well, thank you so much for telling us about this advice and keeping in our interview today talking not face to face, but anyway talking to your colleagues. I have the next part, which is in our previous interview. We started a new tradition of one guest asking the next one question, without knowing who it would be. So our last guest was Lindsay Guzman Campillo, a senior geoscientist from Mexico with over a decade of experience in the energy industry, specializing in seismic interpretation and reservoir geomodeling. So her question for you is: what belief did you have at the beginning of your career that experience has completely changed?
it's a very and resonating question. Maybe we already went through this in one way or another. The well, for instance, I let's put it like this. We said at the very beginning that the my foundational myth, my encounter with science at the sea, so the earth sciences before I could name them, was when I was truly a little kid with or well, in that case, marine biology, if you will. But then, however, the sea as a frontier of science. I wanted to, at that stage to be at certain at the after turning 14 when this friend of mine told me about you, as you'll grow up to be an oceanographer. Oh, really? Then I wanted to be an oceanographer, of course, and I even wrote Captain Cousteau and then it was a funny story. The and I was enamored with that idea, although it was a kid's or a young boy an idea. Uh, then of course the reality turned out to be slightly different. And for instance, I had to, but it was nowhere bad, of course. I had to choose geomorphology as a because it was more attainable in the university where I was then studying. And it made more sense. Um, by the way, it proved to be adventurous because it had to deal with the uh, geomorphology of of a stretch of central Chile, which I mean is nowhere nothing bad at all. Was very fascinating. So it was a discovery for me of air photographs. The So I went there with the conception of wanting to be something, and along the way, whether I wanted or not, the reality of what could be made materially proved to be something different. It's okay. So that has to be accepted because that is, as a simple, very simple name, reality. And with reality, you have to come to terms. But what may look as a drawback, so to say, which is not, of course, because it is an occasion in science. But what may look as a drawback towards your dream, so somehow your original wish may turn, normally does, far more interesting than your dream for a very simple reason. The dream is in your head and it is way before time. Reality is on the physical ground and always turns out to be unpredictably more interesting, or in more interesting because you cannot know it. There is no way of knowing it. And that in itself is the human adventure, nurtures the human adventure. So let it go and jump on. And so the every little step has changed my to answer the question has changed uh, the preconception and has in fact revealed it for a preconception, a nice preconception, of course. I want to be an oceanographer. Okay, fine, great. Then let's go and find if it is possible. Also, because things then can change to such an amount that you may want to be something much larger than the oceanographer. You cannot even find the name to it. What am I today? scientifically. It's complicated to mention. And when I'm being asked out of the blue, I have to streamline to choose one aspect, but it doesn't tell the picture, and still have to find the name and then for it, which is exactly why it's beautiful. There is not yet a name. Uh, Great, okay. But if I am good with words, then let's put it to use, which leads back to the uh, mm, what we just mentioned, the idea of being accepting of uh, letting it go even in communication, allowing a few funny, amusing things to creep in here and there, not just to lighten things, but also to send other meta messages, which have to be, of course, very finely crafted. You have to spend some time on it. The discovering that uh, you need to find even new wordings to define what what applications of earth sciences are today is revealing of the complexity that we are in. It's not just it's not Umberto. It's Umberto is meaningless. It's us and whatever we may be, and we are all struggling into redefining ourselves in pretty crazy world that the 21st century has unleashed. And navigating is quite an effort for anyone, even in redefining or understanding what science we do, even the name of the fields that we are exploring. So it's okay that there is no defined set of wording. Welcome to an interesting, crazy world where imagination, the seemingly not so serious, but very, very serious, in fact, very instrumental of the tool, is something that may save you. You're in the forest and you have got nothing. It's the first day on Earth, but you are starving. Something is in your belly, and you decided it is starve. You don't know the word for it. Okay, you have to discover that too. But you know that but you see something to eat, and it makes it looks promising. But between here and there, you have to find a tool to go and fetch that food. Go and invent it. Now, that's this is clearly a joke, in a jokeful manner of depicting it, but we very much are in a time where defining things is complicated. So even communicating it all the more fatiguing. Um, Draining our brains and efforts is together is uh, therefore of utterly fundamental, and that, if you wish, reunites with what we said about the being there, the all of us, just any, and that too evidently has to do with the efforts that we are eager to put on board. So even overcoming the uh, the beliefs, challenging our own beliefs to stay along the line of that uh, important question that I was asked.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Umberto, so much for answering this, for answering Lindsay's question. I think the answer is really interesting, deep, and it definitely made me think about uh, defining something and generally the like philosophical realm of science and of our life. And following that exact tradition, what question would you like to ask the next geoscientist I will interview?
Hmm. Along this line of reasoning, one question could sound like, uh, how would you envision your geoscience role in the outer world? Uh, because, as we have said, we all, including myself, I mean, are enamored, rightly so, with our discipline, laboratory, working group, because we've been raising it and nourished it, got funding for. I mean, there is a very, very good reason, and there's also a tactical reason, if you will. We are in this world, but in this world, uh, things do not end there, and they never have and ended there. But particularly these days, and the ones the ones that will follow, geoscience per se is the, becoming something else. At least because of the novel needs that we are faced on in complementing climate and energy, uh, water, food, and landscape. I mentioned food, not just because. I mean, it sounds strange. I mean, yeah, but we are not economists. Okay, I know. But we have got a lot to say with energy, right? Energy is not something which you use just to warm us during the winter time, but for instance, to produce food. We've been discovering it. We already knew it, okay, but the crisis of the Strait of Hormuz just reminded us very, very, very starkly what this link is. So you can be a geoscientist involved in studying the subsurface for the definition of reservoirs, which may be used then for the carbon dioxide sequestration, for instance, or methane stocking, and then in the things that are already being done that need refinement, a lot of refinement, like the conversion from, say, the wells which have been are sitting on the depleted oil reservoirs or hydrocarbon reservoirs that we may want to use, if possible, to then for stocking in the sequestering carbon dioxide or gases in general. Okay, that has a professional outlook, and in fact, a very promising one, by the way. Um, uh, but why is it promising? Because otherwise, the risk is of always being much never in sight of the curve. Now, there is no way of being ahead of the curve, as uh, the claims claim, of course. No, it's a bit difficult, or maybe impossible. But whatever, it's not a matter of objectives. It's a matter of reality. Uh, but you have to be inside of the curve, acknowledging it, which means that you are not in a straight path. You will not always do what you do. There is no way. And that's adaptation, human adaptation. It's the history of human beings. So I'm not saying anything new. No, not at all. Just as long as we are acknowledge it. So as geoscientists, we have the richness of that knowledge. We witness the eventful changes on the environments across the Earth, across time in the Earth system. And although these changes may have been relatively long or taken a long time, and of course they did, they also can be very quick or much quicker than we would have acknowledged. And Earth scientists are in embrace and mold towards many other fields these days, and for many reasons, for many needed reasons. So again, deciding that it is worth embracing this evolution is to some extent a matter of life and death, or at least a matter of professional life and death. Maybe something more than that. So feeling it is a bit a stepping stone of trying to make something towards it. Something doesn't need to be bold and big. In fact, it will be always little.
Yeah.
But it will, as long as it is heartfelt, honest, serious, and intense, it may well pay off.
Yeah, that's true, and I thank you for this question, which I will answer to the next yet unknown to you and probably to me also, because I don't know the order yet of the interviews, geoscientists. So yes, you'll yep, I think you'll be curious to know what they will answer.
Yeah.
Um, and finally, looking at the future of subsurface geosciences, macro policy, and the next generation of researchers. In just one single word, how do you describe the future of our field?
The first word that came to me is promising. I know that it can sound a bit provocative, but because it's going to be challenging as well. But then challenging is a bit of an overabused adjective. Everything is challenging. And but for what I said throughout this beautiful chat, uh, uh, the subsurface is something we've been depending on over the centuries, over the millennia, to some extent, but certainly over the last couple of centuries, undisputably. And for instance, somebody, a great scientist and great geoscience communicator as a Ian Stewart from the University of Plymouth, reminds us that in one of the landing pages of on the University of Plymouth, where he presents a number of his works, he mentions beautifully that I don't gaze up to the night sky looking for the next place where to live, but I look beneath the ground Then his wording goes on a very highly intellectual and yet very humane pattern. And what he reminds us, and what is evident to any geoscientist, what should be evident to any geoscientist, is where we are sitting is what we have, which means our subsurface with its fragilities, hazards, complexities, costs, and benefits, which are nowhere to be hidden, of course. We, in the public discourse, from time to time, or in the news, but better, hear about the exploitation of Mars. We may possibly send a human mission to Mars, but not before we have a novel, an entirely novel means of propulsion. Because today it would require 5 years, because a few months to go there, then and waiting for the next window of opportunity, because planets are pretty far away and not exactly next door. And they also revolve around the sun in different patterns. And then a few months back, 5 years is out of the question. It is out of the question for us, even as protections for shielding us from radiations, sun's radiation. So it may occur. Until then, which might require a few decades. It's difficult to say now. It's not of the question of terraforming Mars or exploiting Mars. It's a matter of living on Earth. And it's a bit like with catastrophes attributed to natural the causes. Uh, It's not a novelty. I mean, we are not the first day on Earth. We landed from, I don't know, the asteroid. We've been knowing hazards. We discovered them. We keep discovering novel ones or novel fashions of them, or new time and space patterns. Of course, but they're not a novelty. So because the Earth is knowingly fragile, we cannot claim that we don't know that we didn't know it. Okay. So it's up to us, humanity, and geoscientists at the service of humanity, to help steer, or or scream to steer. I don't know. In boardrooms, or in lobbyings, to help steer stakeholders and institutions to choose wisely or choose realistically among priorities, needs, risks, hazards, and complexities which the effects that may be occurring that cannot be avoided, because then people are going to notice anyway. So better knowing than not. We are among the right people, the right stewards of knowledge of the Earth system. Where we are sitting is a bit more immediate. And by the way, it's also the place where earthquakes occur or other hazards occur. I'll leave you with this reminiscence. When the Lisbon earthquake occurred in 1755, it was colossal an earthquake, of course, noticed throughout the continental Europe, so even in all the way to Germany and beyond, even in Britain. And it was a time when we had quite a few minds. Newton, for instance, Kant. I mean, it was pretty much of a fantastic exchange in the newspapers of the day. Newton would have been, I mean, the genius of the geniuses. It would have been right, well positioned to have the right idea. But it was Aristotelian, so he was convinced, as it was commonplace those days, that earthquakes were due to winds, subterranean winds, which, I mean, the first day, I mean, it's understandable. There's no other way of knowing it. Unless your name is Immanuel Kant. And he rebuked that no, whatever the causes must be under our own feet, meaning far below, not because of winds, not because of something airy, but because of something rocky. And it was spectacular that a philosopher, a German philosopher, a place not known for many earthquakes, although it does have, but relatively less frequent than elsewhere in continental Europe. Well, a philosopher had to come with the right idea. And by the way, a philosopher, but what does the deal philosophy with earth scientists? Meant much more than one would think. So that I think is an everlasting lesson. Now,
Sure.
not everybody is like Immanuel Kant, which of course you'll understood is my personal human saint.
Sure, sure.
But then again, I mean, it's quite a lesson.
Sure. So thank you so much for this really promising word. Promising. And thank you for this really interesting story. And again, about the connection of humanitarian sciences and with the STEM, even though probably they weren't called STEM back in the day when Newton and
Yeah.
Kant were alive. So thank you so much, Umberto, for sharing your journey and your unique vision with us today. Your transition from mapping active Italian faults to navigating macro-level global policy and fiercely advocating for data integrity is incredibly impactful. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us for this conversation. And remember, Earth science is a shared global mission, and decoding our complex planet remains a mandatory task for human intellect to safeguard our collective future. So see you next time.